You're listening to Health Innovators, a podcast and video show about the leaders, influencers, and early adopters who are shaping the future of healthcare. I'm your host, Dr. Roxy Mooney. Welcome back to the show, Health Innovators. On today's episode, I am sitting down with David Fishbach, who is the founder and principal of Excel Executive Business Advisors. Welcome to the show, David.
Thanks, Roxy. It's great to see you again, and I appreciate you having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to have this conversation today. But before we get started with our questions, tell our audience a little bit about your background and what you do.
Oh, sure. Thanks for asking. Yeah. So, I started my career in mechanical and aerospace engineering, and I had pretty traditional engineering roles for the first 8 years or so. But right around the year 2000, all my buddies were joining software startups. And I happened to encounter a software startup called Phase Forward. And we were doing what would now be called cloud-based systems for clinical research, the testing of drugs and medical devices, and the safety and pharmacovigilance that goes along with those. So that set me onto a different path. I was there early. I was not a founder, but I was there early, and we grew very quickly, made multiple acquisitions and operational integrations, both poorly and well. Had our IPO, sold to Oracle. That was a good day.
Nice.
Then I was running customer success for Oracle Health Sciences. That's Oracle's division with 40 plus software and service solutions for the healthcare and life sciences industry. Left there to go to another life sciences software startup, also not as a founder, but to participate in some pretty explosive growth. Had my second IPO. Now for about 6 years, I've had my own strategy, operations, and leadership development consultancy. So working primarily with technology, life sciences, and healthcare companies, and really working on corporate strategy, strategic planning, operational scale up, operational tuning, and then a lot of leadership development and coaching. And there's two kinds of consultants in our industry, in IT in general, and in healthcare, and life sciences IT. Consultants that call themselves consultants and are picking up the odd project in order to tread water and not look unemployed while they look for their next full-time posting, and consultants that are fully committed to doing this as the way they make a living. So I freely confess to anyone, Roxy, that I started out as the first kind. I thought, I'd be looking for another executive role with another life sciences software startup. But the work came in. And it turns out that I really enjoy focusing on the most urgent strategic and tactical priorities with my customers, helping them to identify and plan and execute. And, thus far it's been working out.
So thank you for that. And I think that there's a lot of us that have started off in one box and moved to the other. I know I sure have at different seasons in my career. So I want to go back to one of those earlier jobs that you talked about, where you went from being an early stage employee to kind of going through that due diligence and the IPO and kind of selling to Oracle. As you kind of look back in hindsight, what are some of the lessons that you learned that are around, innovation strategy, business strategy, leadership, or commercialization?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Roxy. First of all, just to say, I was not sleeves rolled up, hands-on with a lot of the details of those transactions.
Okay.
We were responsible for the relentless tactical execution of our commitments to customers. That really is kind of the price of admission to every other conversation that you want to have, or even to an IPO. I mean, I'm going to sound old and maybe a little judgy when I say this. Back in the day, you had to have happy paying customers in order to go have an IPO.
No kidding.
and yeah, it's true. I swear it. So, we were, we were always selling. We were always trying to improve and grow. And because, it was a relatively young category, we also were educating the marketplace and our customers in real time. But really, that idea of selling and delivering and executing, the idea of what now is called customer success, although that wasn't really a buzzword in these early days, to me, it really is sort of the price of admission to everything else that you're planning or hoping to do. But specifically to your question, how do you get acquired? You get acquired really by building a company that somebody wants to buy, not by building a company that you want to sell, right? And there's a big difference. So the way that you grow into an enormous global powerhouse in your own right and publicly traded, and the way that you grow to a point that you have a book of business and a set of products and happy customers and expertise and market positioning that is a good puzzle piece to someone who may want to acquire you. The daily tactical execution of that doesn't look very different from each other, right? I do encounter people whose exit plan is to build and sell, and that's fine, right? I mean, but you can't really skip over the building part. Occasionally you can trick some people into overvaluing a platform play that is eating an operating loss because it's a market land grab, and sometimes that works, but it's not the play that I would pick from the playbook.
Well, I think that that's really interesting, because a lot of the, startup founders that I work with, they don't always have the exit strategy in mind. And they're not they are more often building the company that they want to build, as opposed to, or that they want to sell, as opposed to looking at it as building a company that somebody else wants to buy. And I think that there are some decisions that are the same, but there are also some decisions that are pretty different. And so really being able to sort through that up front. I was talking to someone, last year, way before the COVID pandemic. And, they were in the early stages of their company. And I was asking them about their exit strategy. And they were like, whoa. Like, we're in like pre-launch mode. And I'm like, yes. Like, we need to be able to think about that long distance vision that you have. So that way we're making some of those decisions early on that set you for that right path.
Yeah, I obviously I don't know all the details of that particular relationship with that particular customer. In general, I prefer a founder and a founding team in a company that isn't overly focused on the exit strategy. To me, the most compelling founders are ones who are trying to solve a problem that they experienced, and they think they have a way to ameliorate that experience for other people in the position that they used to have, or with the responsibilities that they used to have, where they go out and they're trying to, resolve an issue. So the first startup that I was a part of was founded by a guy named Dr. Paul Bleicher, brilliant physician, brilliant clinician, great guy too, right? But he was aiming directly at the things about clinical research that drove him crazy, and that he perceived took an inordinate amount of time from his staff without adding value. And that's what he was laser focused on. And I think that was part of why we were successful, was because he was right that he was not the only physician who felt this way or who needed these tools and these improvements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's definitely a great motivator and a great starting point. One of the pitfalls I see around that approach, though, is that problem pervasive enough to create a viable business model around it. And a lot of times when I'm working with innovators, they really do fall in love with the solution that they have in mind to bring to market, because they have such personal experience with the problem and are so passionate about how to solve that in their own ecosystem, that sometimes tend to skip over critical strategic decision making around customer discovery, or validating and testing business ideas early on. They're like, no, it's real, I know it, and I can skip all of that, and then end up bringing something to market where there really is no general market need to have a viable, feasible business around it. But it also, at the same time, is a great starting point to kind of ignite that passion of wanting to transform the industry, right?
You're completely right about that, right? The critical step of figuring out, am I really, just one of many who have this problem and would pay for it to be solved, right?
Yeah.
And figuring out, is the thing that I built really a thing that solves this problem, that relieves this pain, and figuring out, whether the thing that I'm building that I'm really, very much in love with is already out there in the marketplace. I encountered a potential new client. They were very excited about what they were doing. They were very excited about what they built, and they had a good MVP, minimum viable product. But there were other products already in market that already were doing almost exactly the same thing. And they were deflated when I, pointed them to these, they obviously hadn't even looked, right? To see if anyone else was already doing it.
So many people are like, no one else is doing this. And you're like, I just did a simple Google search, and yes, they are.
It was a painful moment, but hopefully, it saved them some wasted effort, right? And, and the thing about that you're saying, right, is the problem big enough? Is the pain real enough? Do people really need this? Will people really pay for it? That comes to a really important point that I make with all of my clients. And not all my clients are startups, right? I work with some, customers of appreciable size. And when they start telling me, oh, we are a machine learning, AI driven, I go, stop, right? We don't sell product. We sell pain relief. Yeah. So what's the pain? And they go, oh, well, we use machine. I go, stop.
And that's a big issue. I think that is one of getting the communication and the value message or the offer correct is it's so simple, but it is extremely difficult. And I think that in a lot of ways, you can have a lot of other things right, but if you don't get that right, you're going to be set on a path of failure instead of success.
I agree with you. I usually refer to grandma's pie, right? This is how I talk about it, right? I go, okay, you own the kitchen, you've designed and built a lot of the equipment, you bought state-of-the-art equipment, right? You're really excited to tell me about all of the features, of grandma's oven. You can do this and this and this. I go, there will be people who care about that. Large enterprise customers will want to know what's going on in the kitchen. Anybody who's looking to partner with you or acquire you will want to know what's going on in the kitchen. But most people want to taste the pie, right? Yes. So don't talk about grandma's oven. Talk about grandma's pie.
Yeah.
Right? And this is really all about how your customers and your users, and especially in the SaaS world, especially in healthcare IT, not only, but especially your customers, the people that are making the buying decision, and your users, the people that are going to have to use this software or this equipment or these tools, are often not the same people. And so you have to pay attention to the customer journey, the buying journey, but also the user's journey. You want to talk about how they're going to experience your solution and how are they going to experience it. So, and when you can do that, it's funny because you said something along the lines of it's hard and it's easy. I used to work for a guy who said that he always kept two presentations ready to go on his laptop. And one presentation was about how hard this is, and the other presentation was about how easy this is. And when you get the market message right, it's so right that it seems so obvious and that it seems so simple that the amount of work that went into clearing away all of the buzzwords and all the schmutz and all the distractions to really, really tune that message and find it and nail it and have every person in the company and every investor and every target customer go, oh yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard to make it look that easy, but when you get it right, then
absolutely.
you know you have it right.
Yeah. So you've talked, quite a bit in some of our earlier conversations around differentiation and competitive advantage. And so kind of just share with our audience, what are some of the mishaps around trying to differentiate your solution from other ones on the market? And then what do we need to do going forward to make sure that we're really are owning the space that we can from a positioning and competitive advantage standpoint?
Yeah, great question, right? In most of these markets, a technological competitive advantage or a feature and function competitive advantage is very, very difficult to establish and impossible to sustain.
Yeah.
Intellectual property notwithstanding, right? The feature and function and technology normalizes and renormalizes very quickly. And the customers do it to you without meaning to. They go, oh, you know what? I love your solution, but your competitor has these purple flags. And my boss loved the purple flags because purple is his favorite color. And you guys totally should have purple flags.
Right.
And 6 months later, every one of your competitors has purple flags.
Yep.
And you'd always rather be setting the feature and function race than, trying to catch up in it, right? But that is not going to be a sustainable competitive advantage. So what's a sustainable competitive advantage? There's really only two, in my opinion. One is authentic customer success, and the other is trusted partner relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So for authentic customer success, customer success gets a lot of buzzwords, a lot of conferences, a lot of authoring. I define it as post-delivery operational success with the use of the delivered technology asset, right? And so, you can think of a piece of exercise equipment, right? You buy a treadmill for your house and you do all your research and you pick the absolute best possible treadmill for you. And 6 months later, it's still being used to dry damp jeans and no one has used the treadmill, right? So there's nothing wrong with the treadmill, but that was not a successful user experience.
Right.
Because the delivered technology asset was not used in the way in which it was intended to be used. And we're not going to blame the user for that, by the way. Right? We're not going to blame, so it didn't deliver its value. So, if you are unable to make an ROI worksheet, a return on investment worksheet, right? You know what? I'm going to reword this for the positive. Any technology or service provider who wants any target customer to part with money in exchange for a service or solution needs to be able to have a very clear, very simple return on investment worksheet that they can put in front of the client. Yeah. And they can say, you have 100 clinicians and in 4 locations. And in general, we find that in an organization of your size, you spend about X hours on this manual repeated task. Does that sound about right? And they go, oh, I never thought about it. Or they go, oh, actually it's more. Or they go, oh, no, it's less, right? But you have to take them through the ways in which you are going to make things better for them, right? We don't sell product, we don't sell service, we sell pain relief.
Yeah.
If you can't do that, you don't have your market message yet. You don't have your market fit yet, right? If you can't explain, you can say it's the coolest tech. It learns, by watching you, and then it starts taking over. Okay, that's cool. That's machine learning. I love it. I'm a total technology, right? But how the user experiences that, right? What happens for them? We don't sell product. We sell pain relief. So ROI and customer success, which I consider to go together, right? Good experience, and it was worth the purchase, is one of, in my opinion, the only 2 sustainable competitive advantages. And the other one is relationships, right? There are certain portions of this market, especially in healthcare, where the risks are too high not to work with a trusted pair of hands. And so if your customers trust that you will make certain they are successful, and if they trust that you have the appropriate knowledge and discipline to protect their interests and do these things the right way, then your competitor coming in 5% less, 10% less is going to be less of an existential threat.
Sure. Hey, it's Dr. Roxy here with a quick break from the conversation. Are you trying to figure out what moves you need to make to survive and thrive in the new COVID economy? I want every health innovator to find their most viable and profitable pivot strategy, which is why I created the COVID Proof Your Business Pivot Kit. The Pivot Kit is a step-by-step framework that helps you find your best pivot strategy. It walks you through 6 categories you need to examine for a 360-degree view of your business. I call them the 6 critical pivot lenses. As you make your way through this comprehensive kit, you'll be armed with the tools, tips, and strategies you need to make sure you can pivot with speed without missing out on critical details and opportunities. Learn more at legacy-dna.com/kit. So going back to the customer success, and all of the research that I've done is one of the things that's like just a critical milestone in this commercialization journey is that when you have those early buyer customers, making sure that they have that positive post-purchase experience, right? The customer success is so critical to being able to cross that chasm into the mainstream market, because those are the people that become the raving fans and the advocates that then promote through word of mouth, right? It doesn't even have to be any type of official capacity, but end up being those word of mouth marketers for you to extend that trust and that credibility to the next set of buyers that are a lot more risk averse, that are a lot more hesitant for whatever is new. But, Bob bought it earlier and Bob said that it's great. So now, okay, he had success with it. So that means I will probably have success with it. And I just think that that's so critical. We put a lot more emphasis on the launch and the close and really kind of forget how to forget the importance of nurturing that post-purchase relationship and making sure that they become advocates and then facilitating that advocacy into the sales process.
Yeah, I agree completely. We learned that the hard way, right?
Yes, we do.
In our before customer success was a common phrase, right? Shortly after the turn of the millennium, that's fun.
Yeah.
We were experiencing customer dissatisfaction, and we were doing software for clinical trials, right? And so the software would be configured and it would be deployed and the teams would be trained. And we'd go, oh, see, okay, we're done.
Exactly.
But the software wasn't the real project. The clinical trial was the real project.
Yeah.
Right. And so to hand the customer the keys and go call support if you need anything, that wasn't working. Right. And so we called it operational account management because, again, customer success wasn't a thing. Right. But we realized that we needed this systematic approach to helping our customers to experience operational success with the technology assets that we've delivered. And once we started doing that, a lot of things fell into place. A lot of other things fell into place too, right? I don't want to give all the credit to my department.
Right.
We had absolutely terrific software. We had absolutely terrific salespeople. This was a really exciting and wonderful company of which to be a part. And our talented alumni are throughout the industry because of the success that we had.
Yeah.
But it really, I'll tell a different angle on it, right? So we had a large operation in Europe, a large operation in the United States. We were growing very, very quickly. We were hiring project managers. We were a software company for clinical trials.
Mm-hmm.
So not through any discussion, but just because of what people knew or what people thought. In the United States, we primarily were hiring seasoned, experienced, well-trained IT project managers. And in Europe, we were hiring seasoned, experienced, well-trained clinical project managers who had been running clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies or contract research organizations, and whose knowledge and experience of software was less than their American colleagues. But for the American colleagues, the knowledge and experience of what a clinical trial really involves was significantly less than their European colleagues.
Sure.
And, we eventually came to understand that we were kind of both wrong and both right, but it really was my European colleagues who first illuminated to me that delivering the software wasn't the project. The clinical trial was the project. Once we started talking that way, once we started talking in terms of our customers' project as opposed to ours, that's when a lot of things really began to fall into place.
So, when I hear, you speak or even myself speak, a lot of this stuff is somewhat common knowledge, in the sense of that it's a lot like intellectually as business leaders, we know these things.
Mhm.
So where and why do we struggle so difficult to like, yeah, it's in my head. It's really easy for me to tell other people what they should do. But when it actually comes down to putting in practice, there's just seems to be this disconnect where I kind of forget what's in my head. And, I just overlook those things.
It's a great question, right? I mean, if we can solve it, I think we're really onto something.
Yeah, let's figure out how we can monetize it later.
My mother's, so I received a text from an old friend that I hadn't talked to in a while, and this was just purely random. But she said, "I was quoting your mother today," and I was like, "About what?" She's like, "Common sense and common knowledge are not common." No, I'm sorry. I muffed it. I can't believe it. Right?
Yeah.
No, she's like, your mother always used to say, common sense and common courtesy are not common. And, and so maybe that's part of the answer. But the other part of the answer is it's a lot easier to take a clear-eyed look at what everyone else is doing than to look at ourselves, right? And really understand our own behavior. So,
I think that's really where people like you or myself come into play, because, even for ourselves, when we're in the jar, we can't see it. Mm-hmm. But you need that advisor. You need that someone that someone on the outside that can see things much more clearly. And again, we know that, but we still, those investments are worth it, no matter how brilliant and how experienced those innovators are within those large organizations or the startup entrepreneurs. No matter how many times they've done it successfully, you still need that thinking partner. You still need that advisor that's going to help you wrestle with all of these choices and decisions that you're making along the way, and get you and hopefully be able to shine some light on different things that maybe you weren't going to consider before.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And, I tell people, look, you're very good at this, right? You've gotten very, very far and you've done very well. And that's why you're in the position that you're in. But the greatest athletes, the greatest musicians, the greatest performers in the world have trainers and have coaches, because they are always working on improving their craft. And, it sometimes depends on who's bringing you in, right? If the private equity firm is bringing me in, then I'm greeted by the executive team differently. Then if the board is bringing me in,
the truth,
right? Then if the board is bringing me in which case I'm greeted by the executive team differently than if the CEO is bringing me in, right? But it all begins the same way, which is, if I go, I'm here to listen and help. Yes, I am here to listen and help, but those words don't have a lot of impact, right? You have to get in there and you really have to listen and reflect. And then, something you and I were talking about the other day, right? Every CEO early in a coaching relationship will tell me that they need a thought partner, with equivalent or greater experience in this part of the business world than they have. Right. Someone who will challenge their thinking, someone who will try to help them see their blind spots, and they all believe they mean it when they say it. Right? It
sounds so good in the beginning of the relationship. You're like, finally, someone that wants to be challenged.
And to their credit, 2 out of 3 times in my experience, that it really does work out that way, right? We lean in, we tackle the thorny problems that have been difficult to unravel. 1 time out of 3, what they really want me to do is, raise the level of play of every one of their key functional leaders across the departments, which I also do, right? Yep. So I have these coaching relationships with the head of each core major function. But when I start asking the CEO uncomfortable questions, and then, all of a sudden this meeting gets skipped and that meeting gets skipped, then that turns out to be a different experience. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But, and look, sometimes I'm wrong, but we add value by asking difficult questions. Mm-hmm. Right? this is something that I believe very, very strongly, right? And one of the other things you and I have talked about is this idea of relationship before task, right?
Mhm.
So we're human first,
Yeah.
and we do have actual, business responsibilities for planning and execution, um, you know, and commitments that we've made to the people that are paying us or to the people that are counting on us to build a company. So, I'm a pretty touchy-feely guy, if we're being honest, but it can't all be touchy-feely.
Right.
But this idea of being human first, this idea of relationship before task, this idea of taking the time to know a little something about the people that you're working with. And there's actually a new children's book coming out called, I think, Ezra's Invisible Backpack. And the idea, I know the author, right? So here's a plug for the book, right? But, the idea that everyone is carrying weight that no one else can see, right? And I think just understanding and respecting that during a global pandemic, or, when a global pandemic is but a memory. I think understanding that everybody has invisible distractions, burdens, but that we also all are here to get a job done. So I think that's really important. But
yeah, you're definitely seeing a resurgence, if you will, or I don't know if it's in a resurgence, but it's just much greater elevation of the conversation around empathy in business. Right. I mean, we really weren't talking about that before. And I think that really coincides with what you're, talking about today is just empathy for our clients, for our customers, for our clients' customers, for the leaders, the board, the PE firm, just everybody involved.
And for ourselves, Roxy. Right? Yes. You forgot yourself. True. I'm going to encourage you to show yourself a little empathy as well. Mm-hmm. And related, but different, but related is the conversation about mental health, right? So mental health is health, right? The challenges that we're experiencing with our brains or our emotions are no less medical, no less authentic, no less important, and no more our own fault than a herniated disc in the neck or a broken leg. Yeah. Right. And I think we are finally starting to make progress on this idea. On the idea that dealing with treatment-resistant depression is critical in treating cancer. Right. They're inexorably intertwined. And I would say that it's probably intertwined with any other physical medical condition. It's all interconnected. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. There's a really great organization founded by some oncologists. They're called Sunstone Therapies, and they're working on this idea, right? That treating cancer is not only about killing cancer cells. Yeah. And they're doing some really exciting stuff, which is really good. So the thing about empathy and relationship before task and mental health, the way a lot of that manifests itself in the business world actually is in the critical importance of difficult decisions and difficult conversations. Right? So difficult conversations are an absolute mission critical, underutilized, underappreciated leadership tool. When they're done correctly, when they're done with empathy, when they're done with a focus on identifying problems and seeking solutions, they strengthen relationships. Definitely. And people are relieved that it's now out there, right? And if it's done the right way, like you said, like the trust is deeper, the connection is deeper, and the relationship is better for moving through that conflict versus avoiding it. Right? I agree. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, way back in the early years of the first software startup, a customer was very, very upset with us. And to the point where, in my opinion, the project manager hadn't done anything wrong, but she needed to be replaced in order to appease the customer. right?
Oh, okay.
And so, so then I was brought in, right? And told like, fix this, right? And one of the first things that I said to the client was like, yeah, we really messed that up. And they're like, what? I'm like,
ownership?
I'm like, yeah, we didn't do that the way we expect ourselves to handle things. We didn't do it well. We inconvenienced you. We disappointed you. I'm like, nobody here is happy about how that's gone. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah, really. Did you think,
Right. Yeah.
So, and sometimes you just have to take ownership. Maybe not sometimes, maybe, owning your outcomes and owning your responsibilities and accountability, maybe that's an everyday thing.
Yeah. I mean, and obviously that plays a part into leaders and innovators, but just really everyday life. I think it's so much easier for us to get into a habit of defending and blaming versus empathy and owning, that kind of stuff. Cheers to healthier leaders and healthier businesses. So as we wrap up here, David, it's been a really wonderful, let's cheers. Really wonderful conversation. We could certainly continue on much longer, but we do have to wrap up here for the sake of our audience and whatever they have to do next. So before we wrap up, though, just tell our audience, how can they get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you to talk more about these crucial conversations about customer success, leadership strategy, corporate strategy, any of the things that we've talked about today that you have to offer?
Yeah, thanks so much, Roxy. So first of all, I have the benefit of a relatively uncommon name. And so you can find David Fishbach on LinkedIn pretty easily. You can email me at david@Excel Advisors, EXCEL-ADVISORS.com. You also can read more about who I am and what I've done and what we are doing as a team these days on the exceladvisors.com website. So I look forward to our conversations.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Thank you for having me, Roxy. It's always a pleasure. And just a plug for you in terms of the things that you are doing in the healthcare IT marketplace for commercialization and bringing real beneficial solutions to solve real problems for real customers. It shouldn't be underestimated. I don't think the great work that you're doing. So thank you for all that you're doing, and I look forward to our continued collaborations.
Absolutely. I'm sure there's more to come. People all our audience, just be on the lookout for it.
Terrific. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for listening. I know you're busy working to bring your life-changing innovation to market, and I value your time and attention. To get the latest episodes on your mobile device automatically, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate everyone who shared the show with friends and colleagues. See you on the next episode of Health Innovators.